Hello guys, this is StuG.III, and today's video is going to be an inbox review where we look at basically what is in this kit here. This is a Cyber Hobby / Dragon StuG.III Ausf.G initial production with Winterketten. They also released a very similar kit that is the initial production that doesn't have Winterketten, and is a very slightly different version of the initial production. Like for example, it doesn't have the viewport there, so I think it's a little bit later production of the initial production. But as far as I can tell, that kit is very similar to this one. So this review will probably be, relevant if you're looking at buying that kit. And most of this kit is going to be very similar to the other Dragon StuG.III kits, which are very good kits. The only real difference on the initial production is, for example, well, basically the ventilator on the roof on the later Gs was put on the rear plate of the superstructure, and then also the there's a little bit difference on the superstructure right here, where the plates are very vertical here, and later on they were kind of angled more towards the front. And there's a few other differences with how the tools are laid out, but essentially that's the only real differences here. So as usual from Cyber Hobby, the box art is just a kind of like CAD drawing with color from the side. We also have this little section here just showing that this kit has a Winterketten with it. It does not have standard tracks, it only has the Winterketten. So if you want to do a standard tracked version, you're going to need to buy some separate tracks, because the Winterketten are obviously different. They have the big blade on the side there for extra surface area, basically. The side of the box here is very Dragon-esque. We have some drawings of the entire vehicle. A couple of details here. Here's the magic tracks that are the Winterketten here with the ice cleats, the Mittelstollen, I think they're called. Fenders. This side here is just the box art again. Same thing on the opposite side of the box. And then over here we have the marking options, for which you get basically the same vehicle with whitewash and without. Also this other vehicle here, which actually I think is really cool, with the kill marks on the barrel. Also the little tank icons there, which I'm pretty sure are also kill marks. So first up, let's look at the instructions here. They are fairly standard from Dragon. We have the front here. I'm going to say just Dragon because Cyber Hobby is basically just Dragon. You have the box art here and also the sprues. Everything that's blue is something you won't be using, so we have basically a couple of the tools, a couple of the the fender support arms there. Basically those are things that, because the superstructure is a little bit different, you don't have to use those. You don't use the machine gun shield because that was applied to later StuG.III Gs. And you won't use these internal parts here for the interior because, as you can see, they're very angled, and that's for the later production of the StuG.III G, because this is very steep. And that's about it. So inside it's probably basically exactly the same up to a certain point for the actual construction here for standard Dragon StuG.IIIs. This is all very straightforward. I've built maybe like 10 or so of these StuG.III kits from Dragon. It's not really complicated. It might be a little bit messy because it's kind of cluttered. One thing I always miss is this little light, which should go on the rear here on this side, right underneath the actual Tokyo mount. Next up we move over to the the rest of the hull components. A little bit of photo etch here to go on the front plate. Also we're looking at the fenders here. The fenders are going to be a new piece, so hopefully the instructions aren't too messed up here. Sometimes in Dragon kits, when they have new parts going in, sometimes they kind of forget to change the part numbers around. But hopefully this will be pretty good. It's going to be basically exactly the same. Just the tow cables are going to be in a different pattern, basically. Next up we move over to the roof of the superstructure. We got the cupola here. That piece of photo etch is always really hard to get inside the actual cupola, but it's doable. We have a new interior piece here for the inside because obviously the superstructure is a little bit different there. The radios go in. You have two radios on one side, one on the other. I think if you're doing a command tank, you're supposed to have that. If you're doing a standard tank, you're supposed to remove the radios on one side. I completely forget which one that's supposed to be. Now one thing I was looking at is a little bit confusing. Here they show you to like drill out a hole for the ventilator, because obviously you're putting this on the roof. That's fine. And then they tell you to cut off this mount for the machine gun there and fill this hole there, but I looked at the kit, the part in the kit, and there's no hole there. It's just flat plastic, so I don't know. And also that piece isn't there, so I don't know what they're telling you to do here, but they're telling you to remove things and fill things that are already done for you. So no real complaints from me because less work, but I don't know why exactly they're telling you to do that. Now over here, this is exactly the same in every Dragon, Panzer III, and StuG.III kit for the engine deck. Very, very straightforward. Just throwing on these parts here. It goes together really nicely. Then we have the interior, which is, it's pretty decent actually. If you have the hatches open and maybe put a crew figure in there, you can't really see in far enough to notice that there's no ammo boxes, but this interior isn't complete, but it's like, you know, about 70% of the way there. It looks pretty good when you actually just paint it up a little bit and you look in the hatches and you can see kind of like a hint of a interior. The gun barrel goes on here. The gun barrel is a one-piece slide molded one, so that's good. And this basically shows you the extent of the interior. You have a breech, the floor, the back wall, the seats, and that's about it. And also, of course, the radios and stuff in the actual sides of the superstructure. And of course, over here we have the final assembly of the components. Often I kind of put them together before this, but they show you kind of doing it all at the end. And you put on the winter ketton. And they give you some options here at the bottom for the intervals of the ice cleats. You can do it like 2, 3, or 4 links. Doesn't really matter, you have plenty of these in the kit. I've done this before and I've got tons of these left over, so should be good. And finally on the back of the instruction manual you have the pinning and marking guide, for which you have kind of like a half side view here for the markings. I guess you're just supposed to kind of do the same thing on the opposite side. I prefer it when you get all 4 sides of the tank, maybe even the roof as well, because then you know how to do the camouflage pattern, but here they just kind of show you how to do half of it basically. And you have to kind of guess how to do the rest of the camouflage options, but basically the markings are crosses, some numbers. This option is the exact same thing as this with whitewash, and this one here actually is pretty cool. I would do this, but I already have another one I want to do. So this one's pretty cool though. You got the, like I was saying earlier, you got the kill marks in the barrel there. Actually this one is gray because the very, very first initial StuG.III Gs were released in about very, very late, I think December of 1942. So they actually came out in Panzer Gray, not in the dark yellow color. So that's dark gray with the whitewash. And you've got the kill marks there on the tanks and everything like that. So it's pretty cool. So here we have the thing that we always call the Dragon card, because it's like a piece of cardboard, I guess. And you have on this all the goodies. So you have the decals, the photo etch, clear parts, I guess the machine gun, tow cables, and also the tracks, the magic tracks. So here we have, as usual, different colors for both sides of the vehicle. The darker color is for always the left side of the vehicle when viewed from the front. Though it's easy to tell here because, of course, it has the blades sticking out. So usually it's a little bit harder because there's no real way to differentiate them between which way it's supposed to go on. Apart from the fact that the pin head is a little bit different on the side of the track. So I don't know. We have also the little ice cleats here, which go on the middle of the tracks at whatever interval you want. I've actually seen these on not winter ketton, on standard tracks too, so if you want to do that you can go ahead. One thing I always look for is to see if there's actually like pin marks on the track, because you often have pin marks on the inside face on either side of the guide horn, and you can kind of see that maybe on the bottom. I know it's kind of hard to see, but right above my thumb maybe you can see that we have a little bit of a pin mark on that track there. So they're a little bit present on some tracks, but they're raised, so you can just wipe them off with a couple passes with a file if you even care about them. I usually do that on the bottom section of track. On the top section, which is facing downwards, you can't even see them really. And a little bit of mud on there really covers them up anyways, so should be fine. So here we have the photo etch. It's pretty standard for every Dragon StuG.III and Panzer III kit. You have bits for the idler wheels. That's what these rings are, and you have a couple of little fender support things here. I don't think you'll be using all these because these might be for MEAG vehicles, these ones there. But you'll be using these ones, and I think you also have to use these new ones here because these are for the initial variant. You have a couple of options here. You have these 2 parts here, and then you also have the same 2 parts over here with a texture on them. You can see that they have like a tread pattern texture on these 2. I am never sure which. They always say like it's an option. You can use the ones with the tread pattern, ones without. These ones go on the fenders, kind of vertically, right where the fenders meet up with the air intakes on the engine deck. I'll point that out later when I'm actually looking at the parts in the kit. but I'm never sure if I'm supposed to use the flat parts or the ones with the texture, because it's hard to see in photos, but whatever. And we also have a vent here for the bottom of the engine deck at the very, very rear. Well, I guess it's like a ventilator near where the exhausts are. And you have these two vents over here for the engine intakes. And it's all really good photo etch. It's always top quality from Dragon. Here we have a tow cable. You're going to have to cut this in half because there's two tow cables in the tank. The Dragon ones are always really stiff metal, so it's kind of hard to get them to sit in place. Often what I'll do is I'll basically glue it into both ends, the eyelets, which are plastic, and I'll glue those down to hold down both ends. I'll kind of take some super glue and slowly work along the length of the tow cable, so I'll kind of put a little bit of super glue on it and clamp it down someplace and then wait for that to dry for an hour. Then go on like another centimeter and do the next spot and just work along the entire length of the tow cable, slowly clamping and gluing it as I go, and then I can kind of form it slowly into the place I want it to be. I also have the clear bits here, which are basically going to be the driver's viewport, the headlight, or the rear light, which we won't use because this is a earlier StuG. And then you also have the vision ports for the cupola and I guess the periscope for the gun sight here. So they're all good, clear plastic. There's never any like frosting or bubbles in these. They're always really good. And underneath that we also have the MG34. So this will be mounted in nowhere on this tank because there's no machine gun mount on the initial StuG, so I guess it's not really relevant, but it is a very nicely molded MG34. Lastly, we have the decals on here, which are cartograph decals, so they're really, really good. And we have the little kill markings I was talking about, the usual 2-1/0 thing for both of the camouflage options. That are the same thing, one with whitewash, one without. Crosses, and then the kill marks for the barrel on that Kharkov option that I liked. And these decals from Dragon are always really, really good, the cartograph ones, so like I often put them on without a gloss coat and they don't silver at all, so it's pretty good. Though now I'm mainly using masks, so whatever. But they are top quality decals, so if you have any extras, save them up and use them instead of Tamiya ones on a Tamiya kit. So first up, let's look at this sprue here. This is the Sprue, and it contains the roof for the initial StuG, a couple of details here, but it also contains the interior for the later StuG and also the superstructure for the later StuG. As you can see, this plate here is very, very angled. Later on this initial one, it's basically like straight, almost vertical. So I'm not sure what's going on here because we have mixed pieces, but whatever. Also, we would have the fenders on here as well for the later StuG.III, but they've actually just not even molded them. So you have to go with the ones that they give you on this sprue over here, I think. So basically we have the cupola, as I said, the roof here, the bits for the grenade launchers. We're not going to use most of these bits, honestly. You have the ventilator, and a couple of front plates and stuff like that. So not much of this is going to be used, but some of it. So as usual, Dragon has done a really good job with their weld seams. You can see them all over the roof here, and also the rivets. It's always really, really good quality, and you rarely see any flash on any of these parts anyways, so it's always good. I'm actually looking forward to building this kit a lot. We have some more parts over here. You can see the nice rivet detail on the front plate there. And we have some very, very small parts over here I'll show you. These are the, I guess they're kind of like mounts for if they're going to pull a superstructure off, like hooks. And once again, they have really, really good weld seams on the sides. The next sprue in the box is this one here, which is well, I'm not sure. This is another StuG.III sprue, but it contains fenders for one that will be a rebuilt Panzer III hull. So you're not actually going to use these fenders. These are wrong fenders, but whatever, we're going to have fenders later on. So mostly what you're going to be using on this sprue are engine deck components and also the front plate. Also, these things here, these are the ventilators. They go right on the sides of the engine deck here, and up against those where the fender meets them is where those photo etch parts I was talking about earlier go. The ones I'm not sure if I'm supposed to use the tread pattern or the flat ones. The tread pattern is obviously supposed to be a continuation of what is on the fender. I don't know, I'll have to figure that out someday, but I'm not sure. It always bothers me a little bit. So as with the superstructure roof I was looking at earlier, we have really, really good molding on the engine deck here. The weld seams are always really beautiful on Dragon kits. And you see you have little mounts there, little molding lines for where the hinges are going to go for the engine deck hatches. Also, it's really impressive how they can mold so much detail in this thing. They only have 3 attachment points, which are just along the back face. Usually you'd have, like, you know, tons all over it. And somehow there's no flash on any of this. I also expect we'll use the hatches here for the engine deck, as well as the armored covers, which are these 5 little plates right here. You won't use the machine gun shield because that was later on. You'll use the ventilators, like I was talking about, the engine deck, air intakes. You won't be using this front plate because this front plate has the holes there for the, I guess those will be the brake cooling vents, which are for a rebuilt Panzer III chassis, which are these fenders as well. So don't worry about those parts. They'll go in your spares bin. So I guess like half of the sprue will be used. You have a front plate here which will be used. As always, you have really nice rivets on there. Or I guess these are more like bolts. And what's cool is they always have the bolts, like the hex heads, at different angles on every single point there, which is kind of cool. This next sprue here is the interior components. So we have basically the entire interior here. We've got the radios, bits for the gun breech and the gun mount here. The actual gun breech, I don't see it's on here. I think it's on the actual gun sprue. We have some parts of that here. We got the rear wall, the floor, and some more bits for the mount there, seats and stuff like that, and also the binoculars. So it's always really good quality molding on here. You can see there's a really nice texture on the floor plate here, which is good because you can barely see it, so you got to give that thing a wash, but the detail will really pop out. You have also the rear wall here, which I think should have a little more detail on it than it does, but whatever, it looks pretty fine. And of course we have the radios over here, which are multi-piece and lots of little dubs on the cutoff because they're really good detail on them, but they do look pretty good. We also have this sprue here, which is the B sprue. I think we already had a B sprue or something. I completely forget. Doesn't really matter. This is mainly suspension arms and also rear hull components. So we have, this is a rear hull plate here for the bottom, and then we also have the top rear hull plate and the center rear hull plate. And then of course the little details here. These are fender support bits for the front of the hull actually. And then these are all the mounts for the rear. Often they misnumber which part to use for all these on the back. They go in pairs and they kind of go together at an angle. If you look at the diagrams in the kit, you can probably figure it out. I'm not sure if they're misnumbering this one, but they are on later Dragon StuG that I built. So we also have the shock absorbers here for the hull sides, exhausts here. These are the idler mounts, and of course we have a whole bunch of different suspension arms here. Really good molding on all the parts here. Once again, I've said that like 5 times already, but it is true. I'm a big fan of these Dragon StuG.III kits. They're always really good. The instructions sometimes let you down a little bit, but the actual quality of the plastic is always really good. There's also very little like seam lines and flash on these parts. So you have to do a little bit of kind of like scraping away on the edge of the exhaust there, I think. But that's about it on this sprue, honestly. This little sprue here is just the gun, basically. So you get the gun barrel, muzzle brake, the actual part of the mantlet. The other part is on a different sprue somewhere. The actual front piece, I think it was on the previous sprue we looked at. And you get the breech here, which are these components here. And, I mean, the detail's up to par with everything else. Good molding on there, really good detail. Now the muzzle brake is often a multi-piece. You have like a little part to go inside it there, which is always a little bit confusing. But if you look at the instructions, it goes together nicely. You can see there, it's a little bit hard to clean that up, but often what I do, since I'm lazy, is I just use like extra thin and kind of like rub over it, and it kind of disappears. Or I can just scrape away with a knife, but it's kind of always there. It's a little bit of a pain, but whatever. On the barrel itself, actually, there is very little seam line on that, so you only really have to just chop off the 2 points there and sand them down. One of these will actually, this one will be hidden inside the mantlet, so you only really have 1 point here that'll be exposed to the viewing public or whatever. Once again, really good weld seams on there. Dragon never fails with their weld seams, I guess. This sprue here is the G sprue. It contains most of the little details for the fenders and also some of the tools. So you get, I guess, engine deck hinges on the rear here, fender support arms, which we'll use most of in this kit. A couple of little mounts here. These are the these will go on the ventilators on the engine side. I guess the engine air intakes is what I called them earlier. There's little like hooks for where the crane will pick this thing up if they want to remove the engine deck. Other little details here like the jack block, I guess, antenna mount in the rear. You have the fire extinguisher, some headlights we won't use, S hooks. We'll use this rear light. This is the rear light you want in this kit. This little guy right here, square one. You really have a really good wooden texture on these parts. You always do, but there's nothing on the side for some reason. It's pretty flat there, but the wooden texture on the top here is pretty good. Strange. Then we have the tow cable eyelets at the end here. The whole quality of molding looks really, really good. One thing to note, don't forget these little guys right here. These go on the front of the superstructure, right behind the mantlet. I often forgot these on my early StuG builds. Now we have the rest of the G sprue, which is the rest of the tools. So we have things like badly warped crowbar. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be bent like that. You can probably see that it's kind of pretty rounded there for some reason. Another one here which is pretty flat. Axes, a bunch of different shovels, more tools over here, more axes. I got the jack right here. This whole sprue is the jack and the clamps for it. And as usual, really good molding on there. Often they keep the actual sprue attachment points to where the actual the ends are with the clamps, which is pretty useful. And the overall quality of molding is really, really good. And very, very little seam line down the edge there, so minimal cleanup along the sides of these because they're round, so it's often a little bit tricky to get those seam lines removed without having to flatten it down a little bit, but it should be pretty good. Alright, so this sprue is the special sprue for this kit, the initial, so this won't be in any other kits, but I assume. So we have the new fenders here, which are, well, they're different from the ones before. Standard Dragon StuG.III or standard StuG.III fenders would be basically straight here. These ones have a gentle kind of bend down. You might be able to see there, they kind of angle down a little bit. Then the Panzer III ones I was showing earlier have a very, very steep step here instead of an angled one. That's probably boring for most people, but whatever. So we also have the new superstructure here, or I guess initial superstructure. As you can see, that's very, very steep, this angle here. The other ones was more like, kind of like an angle like that, I guess. And so basically all we have is a new ventilator, a new antenna mount for one side because the later ones have asymmetrical mounts. They're a little bit different on either side. So you have one here to make them symmetrical. You have rear fenders, which are separate. They go on here, obviously. A viewport for the superstructure side, and some new fender supports to replace some of the ones on the previous G sprue. I guess new interior here with the corresponding steeper slope. So nothing really new on this sprue, just kind of like slightly different versions of what we saw previously. But I guess this superstructure will be new to me slightly, so it looks equally detailed as the other ones. The weld seams on there are still top quality, and should be pretty fun to build this kit. Honestly, I'm looking forward to it because it's a little bit different from what I'm used to. Might be able to see this very, very faint. Oh, it's going to be on this side, sorry. Very, very faint attachment points there for the actual viewport, which is what I like. I don't like big lines tracing the whole thing because it looks like a big nasty line when you paint the kit. I like these little tiny angled corner pieces there just to give you a hint of where that piece is supposed to go. So it's very, very subtle. I like that. Alright, so hopefully I'm not boring you guys too much, but it's just a kit review. I'm just trying to show you what's in the kit in case you're interested in buying it. This is the last sprue here. We have two of these. This is the A sprue, so it's basically like half of the wheels and stuff like that. So we got the front of the wheels here, the back of the wheels here, return rollers, spare tires, which go in the engine deck. You only use two of these, which I guess you get a total of 4 because you got 2 of these sprues. You have these suspension arms here. These actually go through the hull. I often just leave these out because I'm lazy. And I'll just clip off the actual end piece there and then stick the actual suspension arm straight onto that because I'm lazy. Don't like cleaning up parts you're not going to see. Also have the final drive here, MP40s, which go on the inside of the superstructure, though they never actually show you where, which is weird. These are more parts to go with these. These are actually, in case anybody's interested, these are track pins, and they often are stuck inside just the little lightning holes on these on the engine deck. They just kind of stick them in there in case they need more pins to fix more track together or something like that. You often see them in photos. That's what these are. I was curious with what they are for a while, but then I figured out that they are just track pins. And over here we also have the drive sprocket and the idler wheel. You also remember you have photo etched rings to go inside those, which I've seen the real thing and they actually do go in there. I'm curious as to if these actually should have a cast texture on them. Apparently they are cast, but they never really give you one on the Dragon kits. Though it's really, really faint in real life, and I throw enough mud on there all the time that's completely irrelevant, so whatever. One thing I want to show you guys is these little things here. These are kind of like little spring tensiony, I guess they call them like hooks. Basically they fix to the lower end of the fender at the bottom here, and then the top hook bit actually goes onto the fender end. So I often miss these as well when I was building my first StuG, so if anybody's interested, don't miss these. They'll go at the very, very rear of the fender, and they help to hold down that kind of little angled piece at the back. They help to keep it down and stop it from flipping up. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. It'll probably say in the instructions somewhere. Just if you actually read the word there, it says Continental with a U instead of Continental with an L. What you're supposed to do, of course, this is done to avoid any licensing problems with Continental, who still exists and still make tires. But if you can still see that, if it's actually visible, what you do is you just slice off the top end of the U and it becomes an L, and then you have Continental. It's pretty funny. It's pretty easy to do that too, but often I just leave it off because I'm lazy. But yeah, if anybody's curious, that's why it says Continental, not Continental. Alright, so that was last sprue, but there's still one more bit in the kit, which is the lower hull. Typical Panzer III lower hull from Dragon. Really, really good. You're missing all the front plates, so obviously you have a front plate to go on here. I was talking about earlier that we have 3 parts here. Plate that goes there, plate that goes in the middle, plate that goes in the top. Those are on earlier sprues. Overall, this is a pretty standard, basic thing, but you can see you've got little points there where all the details are going to go on. You also have little pins here if you want to do anything with the suspension. I recommend you slice off all these little pins because those help keep the suspension arms perfectly lined up. So you can hack those off if you want to make it, you know, conforming to any terrain. But overall, it is a very, very nicely molded thing. You have nice weld seams on the bottom where you're never going to see them, but at least they're there. These are always good, and they're always nice and square, never any warpage on these. Also remember to slice off these little things. These are not used. I think they might be used on a Panzer III or something like that. I completely forget. I've built way too many StuGs and not enough Panzer IIIs, but I'm pretty sure, at least on the StuG, I'm certain you're supposed to remove all 6 of these little things here. They're just some kind of like molding process, revenant or something like that. I don't know. So that's it for this kit. Obviously, that was just kind of an inbox review. I haven't built it yet, but when I do build it, I'll do a post-build review where I do kind of the same thing and summarize how good the build was. I assume it will be a very, very easy build for me, and it should be pretty straightforward because this is an early enough kit from Dragon that the instructions haven't had enough time to be slowly degraded and filled with mistakes over time. So, should be a pretty good kit. I'll let you guys know in the future, but I'm impressed with what I see, and I'm also very excited because it's a special version of the StuG.III, which is my favorite tank ever, I guess. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know lots of people watch these videos for some reason. Mainly I didn't make these videos just to show you guys. If you're curious about buying a kit, you Google it, you come up with this video just to see what's like in the box, because often a video is sometimes a little bit more in-depth than actual just photos of the sprues, because I like to get up close and show you guys like the seam lines and stuff like that. But yeah, lots of people watch these videos and say they're boring. Well, yeah, because you're not supposed to watch it just on a random day. It's just if you're actually looking to buy the kit. That's what I do them for, at least. And I'm rambling once again, that's why these videos are so long. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're interested in buying this kit, I have no idea where you can find it. It's an old kit. It's limited edition. There are 2 variants, like I said. There's one without winter ketting and without the viewport there. I suppose it's a slightly later StuG.III initial. But that should still be a good kit. But yeah, if you can find this one, I recommend you get it because it is kind of rare. If you're a collector, it'd be cool to have it, and if you're a fan of StuGs, then like me, then you'll find this one interesting for sure. And yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Of course, always thank the patrons. We have Ricky from Ryan's Painting, John Butler, Ian Sistrick, Samuel Murphy, Richard Ward, Johnny Foxtrot, and Rudolph Kiros, who will support me on Patreon. And we also have Dr. EO, who supports me through PayPal, which is awesome. thank you guys very much. It really helps me buying mainly now paint, stuff like that, to build to paint these kits up that I slowly build. I will build this kit soon. I will probably do a video on it, either a building video, because I'll probably be pretty good at that because I built lots of StuGs, or a weathering video, probably for sure weathering video. I have a nice picture of one of these that has a whitewash. It was a very, very early one. It came in the Africa camouflage because it was meant to be sent there. And they got a whitewash over it, so it's like a really nice fresh whitewash, so it'll be fun to do that. Very, very clean. Minimal chipping, should be pretty easy, and I know lots of people like to see kind of like a minimal weathering as well, because sometimes people don't like to do my full weathering crazy mess kind of thing. But yeah, it'll be fun to do a kind of like lightly weathered tank, but still make it look like it's seen a little bit of battle or something like that, a little bit of combat, a little bit of action. So yeah, I'm still rambling. Sorry about that, guys, but as always, thanks for watching very much. And I'll see you next one. Goodbye.